Hi, I am Rebecca Jan Bettis, a student in the Educational Leadership Program at Lamar University. You are preparing to visit the classroom of Mrs. Kathy Stewart. Mrs. Stewart is a beloved teacher here at Humble Christian School. She has taught for 19 years, with 14 of those years being in the 4th grade. Mrs. Stewart has an Associate of Arts degree from Lone Star College, with a Bachelor of Arts in Christian Elementary Education from Patriot University. She is passionate about teaching, and it shows in the lessons she teaches her students. Mrs. Stewart's classroom is set up with 4 sets of desks in clusters of 3 or 4 students. This desk arrangement lends itself to discussion and teamwork. She has assigned each cluster a number, 1 through 4, as well as a color, red, yellow, green, or blue, to describe it. Desk clusters are organized with color-coded bins for materials. Each cluster has shelves and bins that match their color. The desk clusters are structured for students to be prepared for activities. The students are prepared and know where the materials that they need are located. Her classroom is fun and inviting with a Western theme and decor. There are many colorful Western posters on the walls, bandanas decorating the chairs, and numbers for each cluster group made from different colored bandanas suspended from the ceiling. The backpack hooks are decorated with cowboy boots, and each boot is personalized with a student's name and classroom number. On one wall is a Western-themed calendar. Mrs. Stewart maintains a clean and attractive classroom. Everything is in the proper place. She has a bookshelf in the back of the classroom that is orderly with all of her classroom material on it. The classroom is well ordered. She maintains a good learning environment for her students. Mrs. Stewart uses good classroom management skills and maximizes the time for learning. Her plans are well thought out, and she is always prepared to do her very best. She is the first teacher to have her lesson plans completed and turned in each week, usually a week ahead of time. Mrs. Stewart believes in always encouraging students to strive for excellence. The posters displayed on her walls represent this. There is a large poster over the whiteboard which says you are responsible for your own actions. When her students make mistakes, she holds them accountable, and she does this with much love. She's not harsh or critical with them. There is also a poster that says, "Never settle for less than your best." Mrs. Stewart encouraged her students to always strive for excellence. She teaches them to do their very best, not just enough to slide by. She praises her students often and shows them lots of love. This creates a very positive environment, which gives the students the desire to do their very best. She puts a lot of extra effort and energy into her lessons, and her students love her for it. Mrs. Stewart has 13 children in her class. There are 5 boys and 8 girls on her class roster. The demographics of Mrs. Stewart's class are as follows: African American, 6, Caucasian, 4, Hispanic, 2, and biracial, 1. She has mixed genders and ethnicities in her desk clusters throughout her classroom. Group 1, the yellow group, is made up of 2 girls and 1 boy. The 2 girls are African American and the boy is Caucasian. Group 2, the green group, is made up of 4 children, 3 girls and 1 boy. 2 girls are African American, 1 girl is Caucasian, and the boy is biracial. Group 3, the red group, has 2 girls and 1 boy. Of the 2 girls, 1 is Hispanic and 1 is African American. The boy is biracial. The last group, number 4, the blue group, has 3 students, 2 boys and 1 girl. The 2 boys are Caucasian and the girl is African American. Mrs. Stewart demonstrates cultural sensitivity by spacing children from all different ethnicities throughout her classroom. She also involves all the children during question and answer periods. She is very interactive with her students and has a positive attitude toward them all. Mrs. Stewart has a personal love of history, which is evidenced in her mastery of the subject material. Her passion for the subject comes out in her teaching. Growing up as an Army brat, she has traveled all over the globe and enjoys sharing her adventures with her students. Today, you will be watching a 4th grade history lesson taught by Mrs. Stewart. This lesson is about the original settlements in the New World, America. She uses varied teaching techniques and methods to facilitate learning. In today's lesson, the students will be using the knowledge they have of early settlements in the New World and creating their own settlement. They will use various materials to create, name, and make rules that apply to their settlements. Thank you.
Start with our documentation, Declaration of Independence. Okay, so by now you guys should know without having to look, right? Yes, ma'am, but if you still have to look, that's fine, but you need to make sure you're starting to memorize that because it's due pretty quickly, okay? Declaration of Independence in Congress,
July 4th, 1776.
when, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature's God entitled them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind, requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Washington, Adams,
Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Adams, Jackson, Buchanan,
Harrison, Tyler,
Polk and Taylor, Fillmore, Pierce, Buchanan, Lincoln, Johnson, Grant and Hayes, Garfield, Arthur, Cleveland, Harrison, Cleveland, Kennedy,
Roosevelt, Taft, Wilson, Harding, Coolidge, Hoover, Roosevelt,
Truman, Eisenhower, Nixon, Johnson,
Nixon, Ford,
Carter, Reagan,
Bush and Clinton,
Bush and Barack Obama.
Very good, class. Okay, before we start our lesson, let's go over our geography lesson. That means the map that we are practicing. Okay, we have a map this Friday for a test. Up here, Aiden, darling, up here. Okay, what is this?
Pacific
Pacific Ocean.
Atlantic Ocean. Gulf of Mexico.
What is this?
Mexico.
Mexico. Good. What is this?
Canada.
Canada. Good. What is this river?
Ohio.
The one that goes this way.
Ohio.
Ohio River. What's this one?
Mississippi.
Mississippi. What's the one that goes that way? Who knows? Missouri. Good. What mountain range is this? Rocky Mountains. We haven't learned this one yet, okay? But this is the Rocky Mountains, all right? What is this?
Lake Hudson Bay.
Yeah, Lake Hudson or Hudson Bay, okay? What else is on our test? Okay, let's look right here. If I had a settlement that's about right here, what would that be called? Right, Jamestown. What's the settlement up here? Plymouth. Good job, okay? Which one came first? Jamestown or Plymouth? Jamestown did, okay? Did Jamestown, was it successful the first time? No. Someone raise your hand and tell me why. Why wasn't it successful, Haley?
It was because they didn't have enough food.
They didn't have what?
Enough food.
Enough food. Okay, what else? Why was it unsuccessful, Abby?
They built their fort on a swampy place.
Okay, so the first time they built, they still had it there the second time too, but yes, a lot of mosquitoes caused some disease. What else? Madison?
And because since they were in a swampy, they couldn't do their farms and stuff.
Okay, so they couldn't plant food, so they didn't have food. What else?
They were lazy.
They were lazy.
What happened was they were right on the battlefield for Indians.
That's true. You're right. All of those were exactly right. Let me ask you a question. If we were going to make a settlement, someone tell me what a settlement is. What is a settlement? Someone, Brian.
Like
Going to a new place and staying there, right? So if we're going to make a settlement, what kind of people do we want to bring? What kind, Angelina? Families. Why do we want to bring a family there? Austin?
So they're more interested in settling down and building a house?
Correct. They're more interested in settling down and building a house. The first people that came there were what kind of people?
Wealthy.
Wealthy, and
They were looking for gold.
they were looking for gold. Were they families? No, what was it? They were just rich single men, right? Okay. The second time, did Jamestown fail or was it successful?
Failed.
Successful. Okay. Why was it successful the second time? Ariana? Because they had families that were willing to come. Who can tell me what was the first colony that they tried to start long time ago? What was it called, Aiden? Roanoke. And what do we call that colony? Class?
The Lost Colony.
Why? Someone tell me why. Why? Brian?
Because the guy went back to the colony and he saw something on the tree and he was
Right, exactly. Okay, so what happened was their governor he went back to England, right, to try to get some more food. What was going on in England at the time? What was going on? Who can remember? War. Who was England in war with against? Spain. And so the Queen said he couldn't come back. So how long was he gone? 3 years. And when he went back, where were the people?
No one knows.
Do we know?
No.
No one knows? Is that why we call it the Lost Colony?
Yes.
Because no one knows. Okay? Today, boys and girls, look and listen. Today we're going to talk about, we've talked about the Jamestown. Now we're talking about Plymouth. Okay? Who arrived in Plymouth? What did we call those people? Pilgrims. But what were they called by themselves? Separatists and strangers. What were the separatists? Who were they, Hannah?
The separatists were people who wanted to separate from the English church.
That's correct. They wanted to separate from the English church. Where did they go first? Madison?
Holland.
Holland. Why didn't it work in Holland? Give me one reason. Haley?
Their children were forgetting the English ways
Okay.
that they wanted them to remember.
That's correct. They were forgetting the English ways. What else? Alicia? They started speaking Dutch. What else? Right. Remember, they were farmers and they had to work in the factories. So they decided to ask the king who? James the First, if they could have some land. And he said, sure. Now, why did they end up in Plymouth? What happened? Madison?
There was a storm and it just did their mouth in the wrong way.
Correct. There was a storm. Okay. Who were the strangers? Who were they? Strangers. Zane. People that help him out, Austin.
People that just went to adventures.
Okay, people that wanted adventure, that were on the Mayflower. So the Pilgrims were the separatists and the strangers together, right?
Right.
What was the difference between the Plymouth plantation, settlement, and Jamestown? Give me one difference that made Plymouth better. What did they do? Okay, they had more hard workers. What else, Madison?
They set up laws.
They set up their own government. What else?
They had Indians to help them.
Okay, they had Indians to help them. What else?
They searched the land first.
That's a good one right there. Remember, they searched the land so that they would have a good place to build, right? Okay, and that's kind of where we are in the story right now, right? So today, boys and girls, we're going to learn, listen, about a very important Indian that helped the Pilgrims. Because remember, we're at the part in the story where now they've come to Plymouth and they went through the first winter, okay? And they're still going through the first winter. Are you okay? What did you do? What did you do? Okay, just put it up and get something else, darling. Okay, thank you. All right, so they went through the first winter, and now we're going to talk about who is the chief of the tribe that's trying to help them. Who is the chief? Ryan? Massasoit, okay? And that's what we're going to talk about is Chief Massasoit and the Indian that he sent to help them, okay? So we're on page 43 Page 43. Madison, will you read the first two paragraphs for me?
Yes, ma'am. Making friends with the Indians. Imagine the Pilgrim's surprise when one day the Native American walked into the settlement and said, "Welcome, Englishmen." This friendly Indian name was Samoset. Are you surprised that an Indian knew how to speak English? The Pilgrims were not the first Englishmen to visit New England. Captain John Smith, the same person who had helped Jamestown, had explored and made a map of New England. In fact, the Pilgrims were using John Smith's map. The Indians had met and traded with Englishmen and even learned a few words of English. Thus, Samoset greeting the Pilgrims in English. Samoset left and brought back Squanto, an Indian who had been to England and who spoke English well. He also brought Chief Massasoit and other Indians.
Someone raise your hand and tell me what's important in that paragraph that we need to highlight. Abby, what's important?
An Indian who had been to England and who spoke English well as Squanto, Chief Massachusetts.
Correct. Okay, so Squanto, who had been in England and spoke English well, and you need to highlight Chief Massasoit, okay? Both of those names are very important. All right, we're going to find out why they're important. Next paragraph. Continue for me, Miss Alicia.
Chief Massasoit came to make peace with the Pilgrims. Together, Massasoit and the Pilgrims made a treaty, a written promise or agreement. They promised to help each other. They promised to never fight. The promises they made were never broken as long as Chief Massasoit lived.
What's important in that paragraph, Zane? What should we highlight in that paragraph that's important? What's important in that paragraph that we need to highlight? Treaty. What is a treaty? Correct, a written promise or agreement. Also, what else do we need to know about? One person in there. What's one person in there that we need to know something important about? Aiden?
Chief Massasoit.
What did he do?
The promises.
What did he do? Very first thing, what did he do?
To make peace with the Pilgrims.
That's correct. So we want to highlight that Chief Massasoit made peace with the Pilgrims. How long was that peaceful? How long? Hannah?
As long as they live.
As long as he lived. How old was he when he died? Do we know?
No.
No. Okay. It's all right to not know. All right. Next paragraph. Continue to read for me, Miss Abby.
Afterward, the Indians returned their home, but Squanto chose to stay with the Pilgrims. The Pilgrims soon realized that God had sent Squanto to them. Without Squanto, help the Pilgrims might not have survived.
Okay. Someone tell me what's important in that paragraph. What's very important in that paragraph? Hannah?
God sent Squanto.
Right. God sent Squanto to do what?
To help them.
Right, to help the Pilgrims. You need to know who helped the Pilgrims, okay?
We highlight it.
Right, yes ma'am. Remember, we always highlight things that are important, right?
Right.
Although Chief Massasoit's tribe was friendly, there were other tribes that were unfriendly. Yet, through the courage of Captain Standish and the help of Chief Massasoit, the Pilgrims had little fear. Who remembers who Miles Standish was? Who was he, Alyssa?
Soldier who helped the Pilgrims.
That's right. He was a soldier that helped the Pilgrims. Remember, God had sent Miles Standish so that he could help them since they arrived into a new land. Okay? All right. Hard times at the time. Let me have, okay, Miss Hannah Sam.
In April 1621, the Mayflower sailed back to England. The Pilgrims, who had already suffered so much in this new land, much have been tempted to give up and leave, but not one of them asked to go back to England. After the Mayflower had sailed away, Governor Carver became ill and died, and William Bradford was elected to take his place. Governor Bradford was such a good leader that the people elected him again and again and again. And during the next 36 years, he was head of the colony nearly all the time. He wrote a book of the Plymouth Plantation that tells us much of what we know about the Pilgrims.
Okay, that little paragraph has a lot of things in it. What's one important thing? Aiden.
Governor Carver became ill and died.
Okay, Governor Carver, he died. And so what else is important in there, Alyssa?
He wrote a book of Plymouth Plantation that tells us much.
Okay, that is important as well. That Bradford wrote a book called Plymouth Plantation that tells us what we know about the Pilgrims. What else is important, Haley?
William Bradford was elected to take his place.
Yes. How many years was he there?
36.
So we need to highlight all of that. Okay, it's very important that you know how many years he was there. Highlight all of that. Okay. Squanto became a great favorite of the Pilgrims. He played with the children and he taught the boys to trap animals and taught the settlers the best time to plant corn. And he told them to put a big fat fish in each hill to fertilize the growing grain. What does fertilize mean? What does it mean, Angelina?
To give the soil a little bit of food.
Yeah, to give the soil some food. Good job. Once the crops were all planted, the Pilgrims finished building their homes and made peace with 9 Indian chiefs. 9 Indian chiefs. 9 different tribes. Okay? And they traded with the Indians for furs. Who does that sound like? Okay? Who traded with the Indians? Cartier, that's right, okay? Although they lacked many of the comforts they had known in England and Holland, the Pilgrims did not complain. Instead, they thanked God for what they did have. Food, shelter, and safety. And we're going to stop right there for now. Okay, close your books. I need for you to get your crayons out and your activity buckets. Okay? Crayons and activity buckets. Just put the bucket in the middle of the table. Okay, put your bucket in the middle of the table. Get your crayons out, okay? And then your activity buckets. We have several things in our activity bucket. I'm going to show you what your things are that we're going to be doing today. Okay, just put your activity bucket in the middle of the table. Okay. So I want all eyes up here on me so that we can look and see what we're going to do, and we'll discuss it, and then we'll give you some time to do it, okay? Everyone look at me. I want to see your pretty eyes, Zane. Okay? Because if you aren't looking, then you aren't listening and you won't know instructions, okay? So look at me. You have lots of different colored construction paper. That's going to come in handy in a moment when I tell you what we're doing, okay? This yellow piece of paper is your bottom formation. This is what you're going to build something on top of, okay? And you have glue, and you have crayons, and you may need scissors, and you may need rulers, which you can get all of that out in just a moment. Just a moment, Alyssa, because you haven't discussed it yet. You don't know. Mr. Rudy hasn't even told you what you're doing, and you guys are so excited. What if I told you that you know, we're doing something that you don't want to do, and you're so excited? Okay? All right? You can also use your glue stick. Then you have one of these, look. One of these, okay? Today, boys and girls, you are going to build your own colony, your own settlement, okay? But listen,
Come on.
Can we do it in a car?
just a minute, okay? When we do things, we do it as a group, a team. So does that mean one person does it all? No, because we've talked about what is something that doesn't work when you work as a team. It doesn't work. When what?
That starts an argument.
It does start an argument. So you have to learn to work together, okay? So let's look at our goal. Everybody look. Here's the goal. You're going to have 2 goals today. Here's your settlement. Everybody look. And in a settlement, what do we have to have so things that run smooth? Okay, government. Okay? What would we call government? What would that be another word that we would call it? Laws or rules. Okay? Now listen, because Miss Stewart's going to put, because we only have about 15 minutes to do this, okay? And then we're going to talk about what works in our colony and what doesn't, because Ms. Stewart's looking for certain things, okay? But I'm not going to tell you what I'm looking for because I want to see if you can work together. In our government, I want you to have 3 rules, okay? So we're going to say that we're just going to have 3 rules. Now, in most of governments, would you just have 3 rules?
No.
Although John Smith had 1 rule. What was his rule?
If you don't work, you don't
If
eat.
you don't work, you don't eat, okay? So this right here, Zane, look up here. I need to see your pretty eyes. This is for your rules, okay? Now, in your settlement, I want to see a name of a settlement, okay, which you can put at the top of your rules, okay? And I want to see your settlement. I'm not going to tell you what I'm looking for on there, but I need to see certain things, and I'm going to see if you work together as a group, okay? So you can build your settlement however you want, whatever color you want to do it in.
I am Rebecca Jan Bettis, and you have just finished watching Ms. Kathy Stewart's 4th grade history lesson. Her lesson began with a review. Her class is memorizing the Declaration of Independence. Mrs. Stewart stood in the front of the classroom. She recited the Declaration of Independence along with her students. The students were seated in their desks with their history books open. They recited the Declaration aloud together from memory with their books open nearby in case they got stuck. The students reviewed the names of the presidents by singing a song. When the students sang Nixon's name, the students held up V for victory finger signs. When finished with this review, Mrs. Stewart praised her students. She said very good to reinforce their hard work. Next in the review time, the students did a geography lesson. They were reminded that there would be a map on their test. The teacher pointed to various points on the map and asked the children to name them. Then she asked questions about rivers, mountains, oceans, and continents. When finished, Mrs. Stewart again praised the students by telling them good job. The final part of the review time moved to more recent studies from their book. Mrs. Stewart asked open-ended questions about the colonies. What was the first colony? Why was it not successful? Multiple students raised their hands to answer. The teacher called on students all over the classroom to answer the question. There were several good answers. The students said they were lazy, there was not enough food, it was a battlefield for Indians, were just a few of the responses. Mrs. Stewart questioned the class about settlements. What is a settlement? What kind of people came to settle the New World and why? These critical reasoning questions drew great response. One boy got stuck and could not think of what to answer. Mrs. Stewart immediately called upon another boy to help him out. She promoted the sense of teamwork and camaraderie in her classroom. Mrs. Stewart began the reading for the day's lesson. She instructed the children to take out their books and turn to page 43. The teacher, giving clear directions, helped the students stay on task. She called on one student, a girl, to read. While the student read the page, the rest of the class was engaged, following along in the book with their highlighters out. The teacher was walking around the classroom, moving from one desk cluster to another. When the student finished reading the selection, Mrs. Stewart began asking questions to check for comprehension and analysis. She asked the students, what is important in the paragraph that was just read? The teacher would acknowledge a student who would call out what was important in the section read. She would then confirm their answer, and the class would highlight that section in their book. This was to prepare them for when they studied for their test later in the week. Mrs. Stewart called upon another student, a girl, to read a selection from the book. Again, the class followed along in their books while the student read. The teacher then asked another student, what is important in that paragraph? The student did not answer quickly. The teacher gave him time to answer, and when he did not answer, she asked probing questions like, what did the chief do? The boy answered, The teacher instructed the class to highlight that information. She told the class, "It's all right to not know, just help him out." Another student answered. She was teaching the students to work together as a team and help one another out. Mrs. Stewart called upon another girl to read, and after the reading, she again called on the student to tell what was important in the paragraph. The teacher then began to review vocabulary words with the students. The teacher read a portion of the section and asked questions. She asked how many Indian chiefs were in the reading. She had the children draw upon previous material by asking them, what did they do with their furs? And the students responded, they traded for furs. The teacher asked, who does that sound like that we've studied about before? And the students all responded with Cartier. The teacher had the students put up their books and put an activity bucket on each desk cluster. The children, whom had been properly trained with procedures, got up and began setting up their tables to work. Mrs. Stewart instructed them all to look at her so she would know they were listening. She then gave specific instructions. Put a yellow paper on the bottom of the formation to build upon. This caused much excitement among the students. The teacher has built a good rapport with the students, and they were very excited about the lesson she was teaching, but they were able to maintain control in this setting. She told them they were going to build their own colony as a group or a team. Mrs. Stewart told the students, while writing the directions on the board, each colony would need to name their settlement and have 3 rules for governing. She then explained to the students about teamwork. What happens when a team doesn't work together, she said. The students responded, arguments. Her preparation was evident because the students were well versed in teamwork and how to conduct it. The groups knew the pitfalls of not working together and the difficulties that would present. The team helper got out all the supplies needed for the task of building a colony. They retrieved scissors, paper, glue, colored pencils, among other things. While the students were given time to create a colony, the teacher walked around the room and checked on each desk cluster. She was listening for their responses and answering questions. If the student was having trouble with a task, she would give clues to get them started. There was student discussion taking place, and they were working together. The students were comfortable and worked well together. They were cutting paper as well as gluing and creating parts of colonies. Some children exclaimed, "This is so much fun." "I know," said others. The students were collaborating on what to build and where to put it and how to put it all together. The students enjoyed this lesson very much. The teacher stated a time limit in which the students needed to complete the task, and at specific time intervals, the teacher would remind the students to complete the task and that they only had a specific time left. Mrs. Stewart stopped at the Group 4 desk cluster. They were not keeping pace with the rest of the class. She began encouraging them to keep working and to work together. One student was lagging behind in the task. He was trying to make a person for his colony. He was working very slowly, and this task was taking up all of his time. She asked that student to help his team and reminded him they only had 5 to 6 minutes left. The students began encouraging each other and saying things like, "Good idea, let's do that." She encouraged Group 4 to work on something other than people. She said for this assignment, they weren't so important to their colony. She reminded them to focus on where they would live, not on the people. Mrs. Stewart warned the students when they had 1 minute left. The students began working feverishly to complete their settlements. She called time, and everyone had to put their paper and supplies down. She then went to each table cluster, checking what was constructed and questioning the students for mastery. Along with simple questions, the teacher used open-ended higher-order thinking questions. At Cluster 2, she asked the name of their settlement. The students said, "The family plan." She asked for their settlement rules. The students replied, "No stealing, killing, or cheating." Cluster 2 built a wall for their village. a makeshift oven, and a corn crop. When questioned, the students mentioned they would have fresh water when the lake snow melts. The teacher reinforced learning by praising the students for what they had done. She said they have food and water and the ability to cook. That's a good thing. She asked them to name something that needed improvement. The students decided it would be their wall. Together, the class decided it needed to be taller and thicker for better protection. The students used critical reasoning to figure out what was good about their settlements and what needed improvement. One student commented, "Everybody needs more than 3 rules. Let's just get that straight." She used this assignment for application to real life. The teacher moved to cluster number 1, redirected the attention of the class, and asked them the name of their settlement. This group had no name for their settlement yet. Their rules were to work hard, no work on Sundays, and no stealing. They built houses and were growing food on their settlement. She challenged the students to think by asking what was missing from their settlement. The students determined they had no water or protection from the Indians, and the class realized that this would spell disaster for an early settlement in the New World. Mrs. Stewart moved to desk cluster number 3. Their settlement was named the Red Colony. Their rules were, if you do not work, neither shall you eat. All girls would milk the cows for milk, and that you must not work on Sundays. The teacher questioned them, "Where did you get your cows?" The students said they traded with the Indians for them. Their settlement was fairly advanced with a house, water, a firehouse, and garden with carrot plants. The roof of their house was detachable and could come off for sunlight. They made spikes out of wood for protection from Indians. Mrs. Stewart said they had done a good job and that she liked everything they had done. The students determined they could improve their settlement by making walls with gates, by getting more water and a better food supply. She said good job and had the class give group 3 a hand. Team 4 had no name. Their rules were to never lie, steal, or kill. The teacher used prior knowledge to determine where their rules came from. She reminded them that their rules came from the 10 Commandments, and she reminded the class that the Pilgrims got their rules from the Word of God. The settlement built by Team 4 had water, a campfire, a person, corn, and a wall. When questioned about what was missing, the students realized there was no house or place to stay. The teacher said she liked that they had fire and a person. When asked what they could do to improve upon their settlement, the students said to get houses and a wall. Mrs. Stewart told the other students to give them a hand. After going to each desk cluster and evaluating their settlements, Mrs. Stewart asked the students to think for just a minute. She asked the students to reflect upon their task and think about what worked. Several students answered, by coming together, by listening to each other and sharing ideas, by having an idea or a plan, by each one taking responsibility to do something. If we did not have people doing different jobs, it would not have worked so well. Mrs. Stewart then asked the students what did not work. Some of the responses were as follows. We were not listening at first. We worked by ourselves for a bit. We didn't work together. And then we realized we needed teamwork. The teacher used the what worked, what didn't work responses to make application to the original colonies. They had to get in their groups and work together. They had to share ideas and listen to each other and use teamwork. The students also made spiritual application to the task, mentioning how God had helped the people on the early settlement by sending Squanto to help them. And the teacher applied that to real life by explaining how God sends a helper to them today, the Holy Spirit, who helps them and tells them to do what is right. Mrs. Stewart's lesson was well thought out and planned ahead of time. She had all the materials needed for the students to use. This aided the flow of the task and helped it to work well. Giving clear directions helped the students to stay on task. They knew exactly what was expected and easily completed the task. She had prepared her students with procedures for several weeks about how to work together in teams. The teacher used higher order thinking skills by asking open-ended questions and using application to previous lessons. She taught her students to read and look for the important things in the reading, thus aiding their comprehension. Mrs. Stewart used songs and rhyming verses to aid memorization of presidents and historical documents. She drew on prior knowledge during the review times. She fulfilled TEKS number 10 for economics by having the students explain early economic activities by various early American and Indian groups in North America used to meet their needs and wants, such as farming, trading, and hunting. The class also fulfilled TEKS number 23 for social studies by using social studies skills. The students used problem-solving and decision-making skills, worked independently and with others in a variety of settings. The students used problem-solving processes to identify problems, gather information, list and consider options, consider advantages and disadvantages, choose and implement solutions, and evaluate the effectiveness of those solutions. They also used a decision-making process to identify situations that required a decision, to gather information, identify options, predict consequences, and take action to implement a decision. The students worked well together and enjoyed the task. Mrs. Stewart has built a good rapport with her students, and they respect her. The students were obedient and responsive to Mrs. Stewart's teaching. Most students showed a mastery of the concept of understanding settlements and the needs of the early colonial settlers. The students are working hard on memorization of the Presidents of the United States, as well as the Declaration of Independence. Many of the students didn't need to look at the President's pictures or copy the Declaration of Independence in their book. The use of higher order thinking skills with the students appeared successful in this assignment. The students exhibited teamwork using creativity and critical reasoning to develop their settlements. The students felt successful with their task. Mrs. Stewart reinforced good work with praise and taught the students to encourage and praise one another for a good job. In this task, Mrs. Stewart was able to use information to fulfill the TEKS for economics and social studies. The teacher had the students evaluate their own work by asking them what worked and what didn't work questions. This helped the students think realistically about their task and use problem-solving skills for the evaluation of their work. The teacher checked for reading comprehension and analysis of material by using the question and answer method for review. She teaches her students to read a section and analyze it to determine the most important information. She is teaching them to read for comprehension and analyze for information. Through her use of review questions, one can tell most students have achieved mastery of the information. They easily answered open-ended questions. Most students were comfortable with the material and volunteered answers. Mrs. Stewart encourages students to work together as a team. She won't let a student feel belittled or unintelligent. She will have the entire class help someone who can't come up with an answer. The students have learned from their teacher's lead. They realize that working together they can accomplish much more. And you will hear many of her students encourage their fellow classmates by using phrases like, "You can do it," or "Good job." Mrs. Stewart is a well-seasoned teacher who loves her job. She is enthusiastic and passionate about teaching. She loves her students and praises them when they do a good job. By thinking out her lessons and preparing, Mrs. Stewart's lessons flow smoothly. Her use of lesson activities and praise helps the students to gain confidence and strive to do their best. By using open-ended questions, Mrs. Stewart assures her students not only know the material, but understand it. Mrs. Kathy Stewart is an excellent teacher and truly an asset to her students and Humble Christian School. Thank you.